Okay, we are in Exodus 23 today, starting a new chapter. It'll take us at least a couple of weeks to get through it, maybe more. And then we'll get back sort of to some narrative in chapter 24. And that'll be a nice break from all of these laws, I think. So, I mean, you can read if you want. There should be a public law library somewhere in town, probably at the courthouse. And if you want to go look at the Washington laws in book form, they're there. And if you're having a really big problem going to sleep, that ought to do it. That ought to take care of it. So, but these laws are a little more interesting, I think, in some ways than our contemporary laws are, anyway. So, chapter 23, verses 1 through 9. You shall not bear a false report. Do not join your hand with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. You shall not follow the masses in doing evil, but nor shall you testify in a dispute so as to turn aside after a multitude in order to pervert justice. Nor shall you be partial to a poor man in his dispute. If you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey wandering away, you shall surely return it to him. If you see the donkey of one who hates you lying helpless under its load, you shall refrain from leaving it to him. You shall surely release it with him. You shall not pervert justice due to your needy brother in his dispute. Keep far from a false charge, and do not kill the innocent or the righteous, for I will not acquit the guilty. You shall not take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the clear-sighted and subverts the cause of the just. You shall not oppress a stranger, since you yourselves know the feelings of a stranger, for you were also strangers in the land of Egypt. Okay, what do we think about these laws? Okay. Any other thoughts? It is relevant. Even the donkey thing is pretty relevant. Uh, we're living in a duplex over here right now, and the front room has these really long windows, vertical windows, go almost down to the ground. They're so long. And I had to get a cat because we kept getting mice, and we've even got a mouse right now, and the cat is looking for it, but has not been able to find it yet. But our neighbors have had cats. We've had different neighbors since I've been there. This is our third set of neighbors, and they've got a big, fluffy orange cat, just huge and beautiful, and looks like a lion almost. And he comes over, and he's right at the bottom of that window, and my cat's sitting in the window, and they are like, there's just a pane of glass between them, and they are just going crazy, wanting to rip each other's heads off, or probably wanting to make new kitties. But Fortunately, she's not able to do that. I don't know about him, but she has destroyed 3 blinds up front. She destroyed almost every blind in the house. When we get ready to move out, we're going to have to buy all new blinds throughout the house because of her. But uh, and we got a mouse, so that's it hasn't all worked out all that well. But she's quite the cat, I guess. But it's I can't get mad really at the neighbors. They picked the house because it allowed pets, which is one of the reasons I picked the house because we already had a cat. I thought Sherry'd be over here and we'd have Sydney, but we don't have Sydney here. So Sydney would have caught that mouse, I think. But the and that's just what cats do, isn't it? I mean, you can't really keep cats out of going into yards and wherever they go, they usually kill mice. And so they're whatever when they kill a mouse in the neighbor's yard, that's a mouse that doesn't get in your neighbor's house. It's a mouse that doesn't get into your house. So she has brought mice into the house at times. Yes. So yeah. Well, your dog could kill the cat too. I mean, and your dog's a big bad dog, but that's it's a mean old junkyard dog. Oh, she's a sweetheart. Squirrels? Oh well. Trixie likes them too. She goes right after them. What's that? Well, she's trying. I mean, she's just sitting there looking and looking and looking, and she's caught a couple in the house. So that's just you think we'll fix the house and they won't get in, but they find a way in. Those little dudes are smart and persistent and dirty. So that's kind of my. They're cute. I don't have anything against them. I just don't want them in the house. But anyway, but that's kind of the thing. The neighbor, when you have neighbors and you have animals, it's part of life. You can't get too mad. Uh, I think it was y'all may remember like the first night Sherry came over when I was staying in the rent house over on Washington Street. The first night Sherry came over, we ended up with an owl in the house. I don't know if you remember that. It got in the house. Uh, and I think it was the first morning Sherry was here after um, we moved into the duplex. She's got her little card table set up in the living room, and she was doing her makeup or whatever at the card table, and she had the door open because it was a little warm. So we didn't turn on the air conditioner. She had the door open, and she's sitting there doing it, and all of a sudden she gets a cold nose right up on her elbow, and it's the neighbor's dog. The prior occupants, they'd had a dog, and those 2 dogs had been big buddies. So that dog came to see its old friend, and that dog wasn't there anymore. So he gave a cold nose to Sherry instead. So and it's a sweet dog. It's not a bad dog at all. But that's life. You cannot avoid your neighbors, and you cannot avoid their animals, and you have to get on. And you're not always going to like everybody that lives by you. You're not going to like everybody that's a part of your life. Um, and sometimes they don't like you. But how do you treat those people? In war and contention and constantly fighting one another, I mean, the Israelites are going to be having plenty of that as they go into their land. They haven't begun the conquest yet, but as they go in, there's going to be plenty of people they kill. There's going to be plenty of fighting for everybody. Um, when there's an opportunity to find peace, to sow peace, we need to really pursue it. We're looking at, of course, the Gospel of Luke. 1 Sunday a month. We have been since I started here over 3 years ago, and we'll continue to do it as long as I'm here until we get through Luke, and then we'll start looking at another gospel, Lord willing. But um, one of the overarching messages of the Gospel of Luke, one of the distinctive things about it as a gospel, is that Jesus is really consistently calling for Israel to be a peaceful country, to learn to live with the Roman occupiers, to find peace in the midst of this turmoil. And they don't really want that. That's not And it's an understandable situation. You don't like being, no one wants to be under foreign rule, foreign occupation. Uh, the Israel army had no chance against the Roman army, though, and God wasn't coming to their rescue. And that's, you know, that's where their history kind of worked against them a little bit. They had won so many unlikely battles throughout their history. They had had so much more power than they really, as a nation, should have had it ever. They all got it. They got it every time because God gave it to them. And so they think if we rise up against Rome and God is with us, we'll defeat Rome. Jesus is telling them it ain't going to happen this time. So pursue peace, learn to live peacefully, and they never really did. Um, so there is value in peace. The old saying, "No justice, no peace." You know, it's an understandable sentiment, especially if you're one of the marginalized or oppressed peoples. But I think it's you could find that even if you got the justice you sought, you might not have peace in that outcome either. So there's a saying that rich people like law and order so they can enjoy their wealth, and poor people want justice so maybe they can get some wealth so they can be comfortable. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. A lot of law and order is just calm everybody else down so I can do what I want because I got plenty. Uh, so that's you know, I think there is certainly an issue in this, in these passages, the overall message of justice, of telling the truth when you uh, testify, and certainly in the case of capital crimes, and there's a lot of capital crimes under the Mosaic Law. So when you lie about it, you're not just maybe putting somebody in jail for 10 years or whatever, maybe getting them killed, like that day. You know, so life and death really does hang in the tongue. It hangs in what we say. Uh, so there is this call for justice and truth in the American way, sort of, I guess you could say. But there's also kind of alongside of this call for peace. And even if your enemy has been unjust to you, even if there's a real sharp dispute between the two of you, look for a way to bless your enemy. And one way to bless your enemy is to care for his animals. And that starts with the animal, but it ends up being, I say to you, love your enemies. Pray for your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Bless and do not curse. Do not repay evil for evil. Do not resist an evil man. And these are very difficult passages. You know, the New Testament doesn't make things easy. Jesus' teachings are not easier than the Mosaic Law. That's one thing we have to get rid of, I think. You know, that's one myth people have, that God in the Old Testament is really mean and hard, and Jesus is some sweet talking hippie that loves everybody. You know, Jesus calls for things that are much harder than the Mosaic Law. And that's, I mean, the idea of not resisting an evil man, you know, it's pretty tough. But there's so much wisdom. I mean, if you don't resist Rome, you live longer, or maybe have a better life, and are able to serve God if Rome isn't stopping. Now, I see what's going on, and I don't know what to believe. You get so many different messages coming out of Ukraine, what's happening and what's not happening. Ukraine is really evidently, some people say, humiliating the Russian army. The Russian army is destroying Ukraine. I think what's happening, regardless of who ends up prevailing in the conflict, is that area of the world is being decimated, probably for generations. I say that, you know, America could whip out its credit card like it likes to do and probably rebuild it all in 10 years. But if that doesn't happen, the whole land is just being leveled to ruin. And um, I always wondered, is it that much better to be Ukrainian than it is to be Russian? You know, is it, can you live? Would you rather be a live Russian or a dead Ukrainian? And I guess that's up for them to make that decision. And I'm not trying to judge because it's not my decision to make. I think when we look back on our own country, I mean, I think the Boston Tea Party was a result of the British Empire imposing like a 2% tax on the sale of tea. How much do we pay in taxes now?
But at least we're
Uh,
represented.
our harbors should be brown with whatever right now with what we are doing, with the way our government treats us. So it hasn't gotten I don't know, a whole lot better, I don't think. But so sometimes, there is a time for war and a time for peace, and uh, you will be at war with your enemies at times. But if you have an opportunity particularly within your nation, within your brotherhood, if you have a brother that's not really your friend, it's a good time to try to maybe sow the seeds of peace there. Um, the malicious witness, that's mentioned in verse 1 is probably tied back to the capital punishment crimes. And really, if you testify to bring about an innocent person's conviction that ends up with them being stoned to death, you are a murderer. You helped kill him. So you can say something, well, I was just a witness in the trial. I didn't throw any of the rocks. Well, you're the reason they were throwing rocks. You're part of the reason they were throwing rocks. And there is, this, verse 7, keep far from a false charge, do not kill the innocent or the righteous. And it's one of the hard things. It's one of the things that's kind of made me not be a big fan of the death penalty. I don't know how many innocent people we have executed. I don't have a number on it. Just because they say they're innocent doesn't mean I believe they're innocent. At the same time, I have a hard time believing we've been perfect as a country. I have a hard time believing Washington has been perfect as a state, and they haven't killed anybody in a long time now. I have a hard time believing Arkansas, where I came from, has been absolutely 100% perfect on every execution. And we're not guided by uh, God as directly as Israel was. And I think Israel got it wrong sometimes. If the stories of Stephen and Paul being stoned doesn't tell you anything, the righteous and the innocent get stoned sometimes, just because you make the wrong people mad. So it's a difficult. That makes me not a fan. I'm not saying it should be illegal, and a lot of people who get it have done really horrible things. Came across the story recently. The two guys in Utah that were killed by firing squad in like the late 70s, early 80s. There'd been a national moratorium on the death penalty by the Supreme Court, and then they had kind of changed course or whatever, found a way to do it. I guess that wasn't considered cruel and unusual. And these first two guys in Utah wanted to make it cruel, kind of in a sense, wanted to shame the state, so they picked the firing squad. One of them had uh, I think he was the second guy. The first guy, Gary Gilmore, I guess, he kind of became a celebrity, actually. They made a movie about him. The second guy, I can't remember his name, but he had raped and murdered a 12-year-old girl. Getting shot, I'm not going to feel sorry for him if he turns around and gets shot. I mean, there's really no doubt that he did it. He was a pedophile. He got turned loose, and so I don't really feel sorry for him. It's not that I have don't think it's a just penalty for some crimes. I just, there is also this real caution of not perverting justice, of not seeking to use the justice system to oppress, and realizing that testimony in court has that power to really either give justice or take it away and deny justice. And it goes along with the issue of bribery. When you look at our kind of some of our political area, I think we are as corrupt as we've ever been in America politically, and I don't say one party or the next, because I think it's all over the place. When politicians are getting wealthy while they're in office, that's not the way it's supposed to be. When they go in poor and come out rich, somebody's greasing their palms while they're there. There's somehow, some way. So, and I'm not accusing anyone in particular or trying to cite any one case, So I think we're as corrupt as it could ever be. But what happens is all of a sudden nobody trusts anything, right? Half the country didn't believe the 2016 election. The other half of the country didn't believe the 2020 election because we feel like our government can't be trusted because it's so corrupt. We feel like one party may be, trying to take care of their fat cat buddies, and we think the other party is maybe they're trying to become the fat cat buddies. I don't know who you're supposed to pick from in that scenario, but it takes even when the thing about bribery, even thing about corruption, even when they do the right thing, it doesn't feel right, does it? It doesn't look right. You can't trust it. You think they're just acting out of their selfish motives. So when you're corrupt, even if you end up doing the right thing, you can't be really the messenger of hope and truth and justice that God wants you to be. One of my favorite episodes of Andy Griffith, Andy has to be the umpire in Opie's baseball game. You remember this one? Well, the big crucial play at the plate, Opie comes sliding in at home. The guy tags him. Andy calls him out. Well, this was, before instant replay. And hopefully in Little League, they'll never I saw something the other day. They're going to try to bring instant replay to high school football. Yes, please ruin another sport for us. We haven't ruined them enough. They had somebody taking a picture of the event, and Opie was safe, but his dad had called him out. His dad was overcompensating for the fact that he didn't want to favor his son, and had called him and it colored his perception of what actually had happened. Good reason not to have one of the dads be, but sometimes you had to. It's a long time ago. We were a lot more informal about this stuff. It's still just a kid's baseball. I mean, when that's all it is, of some kids playing baseball, that can happen. When every one of these kids is going to end up in the major league someday, then all of a sudden everything's a really big deal. But Andy would rather bear the harm, have his son lose, than show favoritism to his son. And I think that's one of the reasons he's a great man, And the character is a great character, I should say. But he's also put in this position. So even when you do the right thing, it doesn't look right. A bribe blinds the clear-sighted and subverts the cause of the just. So even if you're not the one taking the bribe, if you're a judge and in your court it's all strictly by the book, it's justice the best way you can dispense it, but the judge next door is crooked, it makes you look crooked. And when we're, one of the big things that keeps coming up is the police shooting unarmed people. Every case, to me, every case you need to look at every case on its own situation because they're all different. Other people don't look at it that way, and maybe you need to balance it and look at it both ways. But when the cops get a bad reputation, it hurts the good cops too. It especially hurts the good cops. And I think most cops are basically good people trying to do the job the best they can. But when bad cops do something and they get caught, it makes the good cops suspect. So this is all kind of, in a sense, very personal. But what we do personally, how we do things personally, ends up ultimately defining our culture. And it shapes how we are perceived both within and without. People outside looking in and people that are inside experience it, particularly those who are on typically the short end of the stick when it comes to justice. So it's a little bit interesting. let's see, verse 3, you shall not be partial to a poor man in his dispute. That's a difficult, because you turn around and verse 6 kind of says, you know, the kind of the same thing. There may be the two sides of the same coin. It depends on how you translate them. Some people uh, would translate that poor into powerful. It's a similar word in Hebrew, and it's probably, I don't know Hebrew enough to be sure about this, but the word is the poor word is probably just the opposite of the powerful word. You know, is and isn't. It's kind of like that. You know, you change the absolutely reverse the meaning with a very small change. Um, verse 6 is more about taking care of the poor for sure, because the term there is more commonly used to describe someone who is poor. Um, but so it may be uh, not be partial to the powerful man in verse 3. Do not pervert justice due to a poor man. It's I think it's better to understand verse 3 as it's not be partial to the poor, not deny justice to the poor, but not be partial to the poor, to not be swayed one way or another. Now, normally, particularly I think in ancient societies, we would think that the people were swayed in favor of the wealthy against the poor. But again, in making it in our relevant context today, our contemporary context, I think sometimes there's a big push to uh, really venerate the poor and take their side even when they're in the wrong. Poor people are not inherently virtuous either. Poor people are not inherently free from materialism. They're not inherently free of the whatever societal problems you think are in America. They cross the economic lines. People have them at all different levels. I was chastised somewhat. We were having in one of our classes in my grad school program. We're having a discussion about domestic violence in America, and there's a lot of it, to be sure. Most of it is initiated by women, and I brought that point up and was quickly shot down, even though statistically it's correct. There's a lot of domestic situations in which there isn't even a man in America. You know, we have a lot of single mothers with the kids. So, in that setting, how could a man, if you count child abuse and all that, and there is spousal abuse, female to male, that happens too sometimes. But you know, the main cause is, of course, men. With the thing we loathe is men being physically abusive or emotionally abusive or whatever towards women, and of course children as well. But the most domestic violence that occurs is initiated by a woman. That's kind of the statistical objective truth, I guess you could call it that. Now they'll say that's because men have failed women. It may be. I don't know. Um, so um, I think we have to look again at every case, and I think this is what the text is calling us to do. Don't favor the poor inherently because they're poor, but don't be hesitant to give the poor man justice against a wealthy man. Don't be swayed. Don't be swayed by the bribery for yourself that you actually receive, and don't be swayed by the thought that if I can curry favor with the wealthy man, it'll be better for me down the road. I mean, why would you deny justice to a poor man? Because you think the rich man is going to take care of you down the road, or maybe he's already promised to take care of you. And God is saying that's not the way it's supposed to be in my people, among my people. We treat people, we look at the case, we make the best judgment we can. We consider vulnerabilities. We are compassionate towards people with vulnerabilities, but we do not allow the people with vulnerabilities to become oppressors to others. Do not oppress a stranger at the end. You yourselves were strangers. You know what it feels like to be a stranger. if you've ever been the first or the new kid at school, the first day of school, you know, that's a tough experience. It's a difficult experience. And the kid that usually comes up and talks to you the first is a kid who was also the new kid at school one day. If you go to a town where it's a bunch of army brats, those kids just click right off the bat because they have that shared experience. You know, we've all been through it. We're here this year. We may be in Germany next year. We may be in Italy the year. We don't know where we're going to be. We may be in the Middle East. We may be where. Use the pain of your cultural past, and I would say use the pain of your personal past to be compassionate towards others. Don't look at your pain as a reason to inflict pain on other people. Okay, when I was the new kid, they were really mean to me. Now, I've been the new kid in big schools where there's a lot of turnover and changing. I've been the new kid at a school where nobody moved into that school district, but we did. You know, that was tough. I mean, they weren't used to, what are you doing here? Who are you? You know, you're not my third cousin. Everybody else in this school is related to me. What are you doing here? I've known everyone else here all my life. Why are you here? Well, I thought it was a public school. I didn't realize this was a family school. So it's a difficult experience. Look at the difficulties in your life as a chance to show compassion rather than to say, well, I went through it, I got out of it, now I can put them through it. You know, if you got hazed when you were pledging your fraternity like Robert did when he was in Phi Beta Kappa or whatever it was, be nice to the new pledges, you know. You don't have to haze them too. So, but draw on your experience. Remember what it was like. You know the feelings of a stranger. Be compassionate to the stranger. Don't look at the new person and think I can oppress them because they don't have any status here. Okay. Any other thoughts? And we'll get deeper into the chapter next week. Okay. Mr. White, will you lead us in a closing prayer, please, sir?